around pretty much the same time as Luke, so we're sort of 2 years on. I can't really imagine what 7 years down the line is going to be like.
I certainly couldn't have imagined it 5 years ago. And I think part of what's almost kept me going is not trying to imagine anything, you know. And I mean, as I said, I don't think that's not to say that I haven't. I mean, for example, probably easier if I give an example. I've literally just had an interview last week, and I've now found out that I've got a consultant job due to start in January. And it's all quite amusing. Well, it's slightly ironic because it's going to be at the same hospital that I was actually at when I was ill and had surgery. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. But the consultants all know me there, and they when I went to talk to one of them about it, she was just like, I mean, number one, I don't believe that you're still alive, and I was like, okay, that's nice, thanks. Number two, you know, how have you actually got here when literally 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I wouldn't plan a holiday a year in advance, and she was literally just taking the mick out of me for the fact that was I still doing that, basically. So yeah, and the answer is I'm now much more prepared to book a holiday a year in advance, but I don't get massively excited about it because, you know, it may well not happen, and that's not necessarily even for cancer reasons, for ridiculous other reasons as well, isn't it? I mean, you know, I was so looking forward to going to blooming wherever you were going to be in November and December on the tandem and traveling,
right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel lucky that I got my two stints in January through Wales and in the Netherlands just before coronavirus sort of hit.
Even the 2 days I had have kept me going.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like, who would have thought that time was? I think we all thought, oh, there's a whole year that you can join the tandem, ride the tandem for, and turns out it was what, like almost 3 months.
But your bike is out there. We've got new kit, and you're going to start it again.
Yeah, I am. I think it's one of those questions. It's very difficult. It seems like a lot of Europe is going to be opening up early July. So, but I don't think it's going to make any sense for it to be on the tandem for quite some time. I think I really want to get, as soon as a tandem is a viable option, but like, unless it's like my mum joining me for the whole time on the back of the tandem, like, otherwise I'm going to be like a walking conduit of coronavirus.
Yeah.
That's true.
Sound like a good brand ambassador role.
If you're going to do it, then you want to be able to enjoy it and not worry about things, and
be able to talk to people
without masks. Believe me, hard talking to people with masks.
Yeah, I find it's very odd going into hospital every month, as I am at the moment. It used to be every week, because the masks just remove people's facial, like not being able to see that much of someone's face.
Yeah,
it's very hard to sort of understand emotion. Really difficult. And I mean, I've got a scan coming up on Wednesday, and I'm bloody terrified. But
it does put a bit of a twist on whether it would be nicer to have a video call or a face-to-face conversation with someone in a mask, in terms of the level of expression and non-verbal communication that's possible face-to-face, but is limited by can't seeing actually someone's face, or having doing it across a video link, which is of course just nowhere near the same.
Well, I just found going into Guys and seeing all the staff there that I've known for 2 years hidden behind masks really disconcerting. Because I've got to know them really well, and they've got to know me as a bit of a pain in the arse because I don't do what they tell me to do. And now you can't really see what they're actually, I kind of don't think I can really like understand what they're thinking or feeling. And then the consultations with the doctors are all done via phone, so it's all different at the moment.
How have you found that, Kirsty, being a doctor?
Yeah, I mean, really tough. You realise how much more. So we're doing all of our consultations where we can by phone, and you realise what you're missing out on in terms of seeing facial expression, seeing somebody walk into the room, and missing all of that. And when I had one situation where the patient was a 17-year-old who was at home, and he was at home with his parents, and it was the parents that were getting in touch, and it was like, not, or at least if you're all in a room together, you get a bit of a feel for the room, but trying to get a feel for that across the telephone was absolutely, I mean, we ended up bringing him into the hospital because I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. But yeah, no, it's been hard. And we've all said that telephone consultations are actually almost more emotionally draining, or they are more emotionally draining, because you're trying to work so hard to pick up those extra cues that you would ordinarily just, they would just be there in person. So and I mean, I haven't thankfully had to get involved with any of the kind of giving bad news over the telephone, but a lot of my colleagues obviously have been, and I think that's just been awful, absolutely awful.
And then not to mention the lack of human touch.
Yeah.
I mean, between family members, between friends and family, what's the thing that you most want to do if you hear bad news or good news? You want to hug someone, and not be able to do that is.
I think it would be absolutely awful to be diagnosed with cancer throughout this period. I just don't know. It's scary, actually.
Miranda, thank you as well. I want to say thank you to you all for really interesting discussion and for sharing, some really personal stuff. I'm really excited to share it. I hope you are, because I felt there was some very nuggety things in there, isn't sort of like gold dust, but in a more condensed form.
I think thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me, Luke. As I've already said, there were a couple of things that I actually wrote down where Kirsty said, or Kate, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, that you seem to go from scan to scan, and that's and the lack of control, and it's particularly very much at the beginning. You just don't know. You have no plan, and I'm very much a plan program. I like to have a plan. And when I have no plan, I feel totally out of control. And the other thing that I also wrote down was I remember when I was writing myself a diary at one point, and I said, I don't want to be defined by cancer. I want to be me. I don't want to be. I want people to empathise and acknowledge when I'm tired and fatigued and struggling, but I want to be me. So actually, as an example of that, is I was having a really hard time at work throughout my treatment, and I subsequently found another job. And the new job, I didn't tell them that I'd had cancer. So I went in there as me, and 18 months down the line, I then mentioned to my land manager that I'd had cancer sort of a year previously, because I wanted me to be recognised as me and for what I could do, and not be given any excuses as to, oh well, she's not performing very well today, or she is performing well, isn't that good because she's been through cancer. So yeah, that not defining bit was definitely something that came to my forefront in that discussion.
I think that's one of the big things that we missed out on, and thanks for raising it now, because it's such a good point, and we just run out of time. 40 minutes isn't enough. That's very much how I felt when I was at Oxford. Like I told one person, I think, plus my course mates, because it was just, I was missing class, but beyond that, I told like one other person, because I didn't want to be defined. And that's something that I think is such a big part of this, right? How do we define ourselves and to what extent then are we limited by that definition? Any thoughts, Kirsty or Kate?
I guess before I defined myself as a sister, a daughter, a friend, a teacher, a wife, a swimmer, a runner, all of those sorts of things. To then have cancer thrown in there didn't really fit. And it still doesn't really fit.
Yeah. Kirsty?
Well, I suppose that the other thing that happened to me, it's kind of coming back to work as well, is that I probably, certainly up until the diagnosis, for the previous 4 and a bit years, I would have very much defined myself as a doctor. That was what, that was my life. So I not only then got this thing whereby, well, now, cancer's your life, I also wasn't a doctor anymore. So I had a complete loss of that identity, which was just, well, for the first year when I wasn't working was awful, but interestingly that it actually in the longer term it's probably been a better thing, because it's made me realize that I really shouldn't just define myself, well, not even define myself, but not define myself with one thing, because you do kind of risk that thing becoming a problem. And I mean, I used to play football as well, so I probably would have said, I was a footballing doctor, and then when you lose football, what you have to think a bit more about what you really are. And actually I'm now probably just quite happy being defined as a nice person who's had a bit of life experience and likes various things.
So interesting, isn't it, when you strip back label after label after label, and sometimes events force us that those labels are forcibly stripped away, because most of the time we don't. It's kind of an unpleasant process. So you go oh, if I didn't do triathlon, what would I be? But that's it's such a, I think we've got to be able to answer that question.
What, as in, who are we?
Yeah, what matters to us? If I can't say, I'm using myself as the example, so I don't want to speak for anyone else, but if I can't, if for some reason I could no longer do sport, and I could no longer, play musical instruments, and I couldn't, for whatever reason, do any academic work, or whatever, those are big parts of my identity. But what could I then, look myself in the mirror and say, Luke, this is why you get up in the morning? I'd be interested if you.
I think for me, because I'm probably older than the rest of you. For me, it's given me an opportunity to actually not have to define myself. It's given me the opportunity of saying, what, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to enjoy life, and I'm not going to worry about a career. I've been there, done that. I don't need to, I need to earn money, but I don't need to prove myself to anybody or to myself. That means that I can appreciate possibly that. I think Luke and you and I had this discussion as we were cycling along in the pouring rain. I can appreciate that blue sky more, and actually, I wake up in the morning and I see that blue sky, and I probably wouldn't have done that or taken it on board nearly as well as I had previously. And I think I want to give something back, and whether that is whether that is raising money, whether that is inspiring people, whether that is just holding somebody's hand, there might be little things, but for me that's probably much greater feeling for me than it would be to improve my career, for example, at the moment. So small things can still mean big things, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. Things like the times when I'd leave the hospital, having been an inpatient for sort of 5 days or so, and just feeling the fresh air on my face, and just being like, I'm not in a ward, I'm not in a bed anymore, I'm free, I'm out. Especially because Guy's has bars on its windows, which is really unkind. So you have all these beautiful views of London, like you can see St Paul's and everything, and yet there's bars on the windows and you can't open them, so you can't have fresh air, you're stuck in air-conditioned rooms. And yeah, just every time you're discharged, it's like the sense of every sense is highlighted, I think.
Yeah.
Even if it's noisy, you know, when back pre-corona, when it used to be just trying to avoid getting run over by London traffic and angry taxi drivers. It was still just, I'm out.
Yeah. Interesting what you were saying, Miranda, about, you know, I know the career and needing to prove yourself, or not to anyone else and not to yourself. And it's like, I don't know, that's something I definitely struggle with. Like I've been, you know, had to face some, you know, challenges, but certainly it's still a part of my identity that I think I still do feel deep down, or not so deep down, that I need to sort of prove myself and do stuff that yeah, I feel is worthwhile. And it's a very difficult one to try and distinguish what is you know, me wanting to prove myself, or feeling like I need to, you know, work at a high level, whatever that means, and doing something because you think, you know, there are going to be people who will benefit, and you know, that there are things that you can contribute, and if you can have a positive contribution to other people, then why would, you know, surely you would want to sort of put in a lot of effort into that. How have you felt about that, Kirsty? Straddling the, you know, the career ladder of medicine and consultant, you know, becoming a consultant. And
yeah, so I mean, I think really just I've got to where I've got to now, but I haven't got there because I've spent the last 5 years obsessing about it. It's kind of been been a kind of second, you know, a secondary thing that just happens to have happened because have been very lucky to be able to kind of carry on. But when I took a job that meant that ultimately if I was able to carry on working, I would get to a consultant level, and it would take 5 years. When I took that job, I nearly didn't take it because I didn't think I would still be around, and I was taking it, and I felt guilty because I was taking that place or somebody else who probably would be able to get through to consultant level. So I took a lot of persuading for people to actually say, well, you know, go on, just give it a go, and you know, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but something else bad could happen to somebody else tomorrow, and it, you know, they wouldn't get there either. But I think what Miranda was saying is along that journey, no, not using the word journey, damn, we could have had that, you know, a drinking game where if you use the word journey, you have to drink.
But drunk histories. You can post drunk histories when they like have to tell like a story about King Henry VIII, and they just drink throughout it, and it ends. We should maybe do that.
We're fine. But over those periods of years, I've not necessarily consciously, but I have made a big effort to enjoy the little things and the small things along the way, because then whatever happens, you know, in 2 weeks' time, it doesn't matter as much. And you know, the sky. So for the last 7 years, the sky has been bluer, the poppies have been redder, the bluebells have been bluer. You know, and I've really enjoyed that as well. And I've discovered mindfulness and try and be as mindful as possible, and that has helped as well. So
a friend asked me, what's the greatest gift that cancer has given you?
And what was your response?
Well, first of all, I thought it's not given me anything. It's stripped away my life and what I thought I had. But then on reflection, I sort of agree with what Kirsty is saying. It's allowed me to stop and think and notice things around that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. because I was just, in London, rushing around, working my way up the career ladder, not really taking much time. Whereas now I sort of, the sky is bluer, even when it's raining.
What would you say to that, Miranda? What's the greatest gift it's given you?
What's the greatest gift that it's given me? I think that I understand myself more. That it's made me do a lot of reflection, and that I've achieved a lot more than I ever thought I had. After the cancer diagnosis, I went through a terrible stage of saying to myself I'd achieved nothing and what a waste my life had been, and I always wanted to do things, never got there, and had never reached the standards and the levels that I wanted to attain. But actually, I think it has made me realise that I have achieved a lot, and that I want to help others in whatever form that comes in. Not necessarily. I don't know in what form that's going to come, but it's opened my mind to alternatives, and that I have to care for myself and others better.
What do you think, Kirsty?
I have two things. So now Miranda said that, I'm definitely going to go for self-care and just being, because I was the most critical throughout teenage years, throughout university, throughout med school. I was like so self-critical and, so hard on myself, and just crazy, really, absolutely crazy. So that's definitely one thing. And then the other thing is saying yes to things and taking chances and not worrying about the fact that something might not work out, or it might not happen how you want it to happen. But because if you don't say yes and try something, it's definitely not going to happen. And I think seeing your tweet on Twitter and saying yes to that was probably one of the best examples.
I think that's what brought us all on the back of the tandem, really, isn't it?
Yeah, biggest mistake you've made so far.
Not at all.
Yeah. It's interesting, that question, because well, first of all, I think it's a question that requires quite a lot of guts, and I feel it could easily be taken the wrong way. Like, if said insensitively, it's like, you must be rocking, like, you must love life so much right now because you had a cancer diagnosis. Like, aren't you grateful? Like,
someone asked me that. A friend asked me that whilst I was in hospital, whilst I was an inpatient. They came to visit me for their lunch break. At first, I felt like, well, it's given me nothing, because you're able to leave your job, come here, have lunch with me, go back to work. I'm stuck here attached to tubes and wires, and I'm unable to move. But I actually think it's probably one of the best questions that I've been asked, and it was asked by a very close friend who knew they could get away with that because it's the sort of conversations we'd have. So yeah,
I think if it's asked by a close friend, that's definitely a different story. One of my close friends, he visited me in hospital, and he told me actually a couple of weeks ago, he'd visit me and then he'd go on dates, like Tinder dates, and he was like, this is totally bizarre. I've been like with my friend Luke, who's going through chemotherapy, and now I can go back to this other life where I like go on dates with girls. Like, I think it was a very bizarre situation for him to be in. But I kind of feel, and this is the conclusion I've come to in my own mind, that having cancer might kill me, but it's my greatest blessing, and it might be both my greatest blessing and it will, and kill me. Both of those things are possible, but I suddenly feel like the opportunities that I've had since being diagnosed with cancer, I didn't expect to get this point, but like, hey, it's pretty cool. I can do a cycle ride and people care. Like, no one usually cares about cycling, doing a long distance cycle ride. So many people do that, but like, I feel very lucky to now have a platform, but I'm also aware that, it's, there must be some reference from the Greek classics of, some sort of potion that makes you super strong, but then, some sort of Faustian pact, right? That you get supercharged.
Your portrait of Dorian Gray, that's, yeah.
So I went too far back in time then. We've got some reading to do as well. I was wondering, but to what extent would you guys agree with that it could be the greatest blessing that we have, but it might kill us at the same time?
Anything might kill us. I mean, you could be run over by a bus, you could be run over, have a heart attack. The one certainty is that we are all going to die. And so we just don't know how, we don't know when, hopefully it won't be imminently soon. I mean, coronavirus could kill us. You don't know. But
what do you think, Kirsty?
I suppose we put it slightly differently now. If you were to, so 6 years ago, if you'd have said to me, would you prefer to have the life where you've had cancer or the life where you haven't? I would have completely said, just take it away, get rid of it. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. This has ruined everything. Whereas now, and I accept this is with the benefit of all of those years. I wouldn't change it. I certainly wouldn't change it. I think my life has been better overall because of it.
Yeah.
And there are still things that aren't right and that I wish, that I can still get angry and annoyed about, that I kind of think cancer has taken from me, whatever, but it's still, I'm happy now with where I am and who I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, but we are the lucky ones, to have got because, well, yeah, some people don't get the opportunity to really have much chance to put into practice. They don't have much chance to put into practice the perspective that they gain. Any thoughts, Miranda?
I think it's difficult, isn't it? My life has, I see life very differently now to what I did before. There are things that the cancer has given me and caused, and that I argue with every day. My body isn't functioning as it used to, but I think I am a better person for it. So whether I would say that I would go through that again to be a better person, I don't know. But I do think that I am a better person for it. What about you, Luke?
Well, yeah, I guess I think if it doesn't kill me, it will be the best thing that's happened to me, and it might be the thing that is the best thing that's happened to me and also kill me.
Yeah.
And it sounds a bit trite like that, but I think it is true. But you get to go back to Kirsty's thing, even now, I don't know even now, but certainly when I found out my diagnosis, anything anything I could have done to taken it away. You know, for the first 6 months, the first year, really, I didn't expect to see my 25th birthday. You know, I was 9 months into treatment, you know, I didn't see any of that. So anything to take that away, I just really didn't expect to be here now. So but equally, I'm not going to dwell too much on what could have been, because it isn't.
No, absolutely.
Thank you once again to you all so much. I've really enjoyed this discussion and found it very, very stimulating. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Luke. I think it's lovely to see you again. I've been following you, obviously, and you know, your podcasts and everything else. But it's been lovely. It's lovely to meet you, Kirsty, and Kira and Kate. And thank you for giving us the opportunity of chatting to you.
Yeah, it's been a good chat.
Thank you.